than have to deal with a situation like SDTC in the public sphere. And I heard someone asking who said that. That was an employee who used to work at SDTC who was at committee and said that under committee. They're quoted. So that's right out of the committee meeting. I'm sorry, it gives me 5 more seconds. I've got lots more to go, Mr. Speaker. I'm looking forward to continuing after QP.
The honourable member will have the opportunity to use the rest of his speech. I think there'll be about 8 minutes remaining in his time. Statements by members. Déclaration de député. The honourable member for Vancouver Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have a problem. 30 years ago, polio was eradicated in the Americas. 2 generations of children were made safe from the death and disability that polio wrought. Now we must re-wage this battle. We're seeing long-eradicated diseases make a comeback, in most part due to the disinformation that fuels anti-vax communities. As a physician, I watch in despair as conditions like measles and rubella trickle back into our homes and classrooms, bringing with them chronic morbidity, death, and disability to a new generation. Canada was the first country to invest in the fight to end polio worldwide. Our objective was to totally eliminate the disease globally. Today, polio is on the rise again, and with global travel, it will become a pandemic. Colleagues, Canada must resume our global leadership. Our $151 million pledge over 3 years to the Global Polio Eradication Initiative to immunize 370 million children is a start. The world's children deserve no less.
The honourable member for York Simcoe.
Mr. Speaker, it's been 1 year since my Conservative bill C-280 passed the House of Commons. This important bill will ensure that Canada's fresh fruit and vegetable growers are paid for the food they grow, and it will save Canadians money. But this Prime Minister's hand-picked senators have held up the bill for months, and now some are actively looking to defeat it. In committee, one senator even told produce farmers, "Tough luck, the whole system is crooked, but life's not fair, and you're just going to have to deal with it." Talk about out of touch, Mr. Speaker. Bill C-280 supports farmers, protects our food security, promotes cross-border trade, and practically every MP voted for it. But Liberal-appointed senators want to ignore the will of the House and side with big banks instead. They need to get their act together, stand with common-sense Conservatives in support of C-280 and our farmers, and bring it home.
The honourable member from Kitchener-Conestoga.
Mr. Speaker, as the leaves turn to their brilliant autumn hues, it reminds us that Kitchener-Waterloo Oktoberfest is here once again. I'm thrilled to invite everyone to the 56th annual celebration of this iconic festival, running until October 19th. For over 5 decades, Kitchener-Waterloo Oktoberfest has been a cornerstone of our region. It's the largest Bavarian festival in North America. From the official keg tapping ceremony to delicious German cuisine served by local clubs and restaurants to vibrant cultural events, each day there's something for everyone. Our Thanksgiving Day Parade will be broadcast nationwide, and throughout the festival there'll be family fun for all ages, including activities for children and a free family breakfast. We also host a community food drive. So whether you're dancing a polka, enjoying a traditional meal, or participating in family fun, this festival brings us together in camaraderie, culture, and celebration. So thanks to the organizers and volunteers whose dedication keep the spirit of Oktoberfest alive and thriving. Enjoy Oktoberfest. Prost.
The honourable member for Abitibi to Miscamanque. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to mark the creation of a very special ribbon in my region, the Nathan Ribbon. At the end of August 2024, Nathan Makamo, a young teenager, was hit by a car while crossing the road after getting off a school bus. As the father of 2 teenagers, my thoughts are with the family affected by this tragedy. And that's why I'm wearing this ribbon today. Yellow and black, the color of school buses that travel our roads. It's an awareness-raising tool created by Autobus Mau, a company in my region. I salute the leadership of Pierre and Nicolas Mau. Every day, these big yellow and black buses are on our roads with the most precious assets, our children. Every day, school bus drivers witness actions that can endanger the lives of our children. This ribbon is a way of honoring Nathan's memory, and I ask you all to obtain one. It's a way to remind everyone of our responsibility. And do not forget that when the lights are flashing, we stop. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Humber River, Black Creek.
It is my great pleasure to acknowledge the incredible work of the Global Action Network for Sickle Cell and Other Inherited Blood Disorders. This organization is truly making a difference for those affected by serious blood disorders. The challenges posed by inherited conditions like sickle cell disease, thalassemia, hemophilia, aplastic anemia, and diamond blackfan anemia are significant. Yet the commitment of this network to raise awareness, advocate for timely diagnosis, and promote comprehensive treatments is inspiring. Global Action Network for Sickle Cell and Other Inherited Blood Disorders will be holding a reception tomorrow evening. I would like to invite all of my honourable colleagues to meet with professionals, advocates, and individuals living with inherited blood disorders tomorrow evening in the Valor Building. Our support to this cause is invaluable. Thank you very much.
The honourable member from Kildonan, St. Paul.
1 year ago today, Jews experienced the worst attack since the Holocaust. Innocent Jews were barbarically slaughtered. Women's bodies were broken from vicious rape. Children tortured in front of their parents. People burned alive and mutilated. 1,200 Jewish lives were horrifically ended that day. And 101 hostages continue to be held by Hamas terrorists responsible for this massacre. And since then, unbelievably, right here in Canada, Jews have experienced relentless anti-Semitism targeting Jewish businesses, schools, retirement homes, and synagogues. It is a national failure that Jews no longer feel safe in this country. And yet Jewish people continue to fight. Their resolve is stronger than ever. Conservatives stand with them and with the State of Israel. We condemn the anti-Zionist hatred and the spineless Canadian leaders who have allowed it to take root here at home. Today we pray for Israel and for the victory of Western democratic values. Am Israel High.
The honourable member from Toronto, Danforth.
Today marks one awful year since a Hamas terrorist attack on Israel that took the lives of 1,200 people, including 8 Canadians. Also on that day, more than 240 hostages from dozens of countries were taken hostage to Gaza. Over 100 remain there today. Let us all recommit today to ensure that they can soon rejoin their loved ones. The killing, the sexual violence, the taking of hostages on October 7th marks the largest atrocity on the Jewish people since the Holocaust. It broke our hearts. But as Leonard Cohen said, there's a crack in everything, and that's how the light gets in. And today, we must come together to find and form that light. Hirsch's mother said that in a competition of pain, there are no winners. And there's been so much pain, and there have been no winners. But today, we can hold space to mourn those who were killed on October 7th. And we pray and we work for peace. We pray and we work for the release of the hostages. Let that be our light.
The honourable member from Vaughan Woodbridge.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize the important work that leading arthritis organizations are doing across Canada. This week they are on Parliament Hill raising awareness about the challenges faced by more than 6 million Canadians living with arthritis. They embody the spirit of advocacy that is so vital in the fight against this pervasive disease. Often misunderstood as an ailment of older people, half of the people affected by arthritis are under 65, including around 25,000 children. Arthritis is the most common chronic disease in Canada. It is estimated to rise to 9 million Canadians, or 1 in 4, by 2040. The debilitating pain limits mobility, hampers productivity, and sadly can lead to isolation and impact on mental health. Mr. Speaker, there is no cure to arthritis, but together we can make a difference and help improve the lives of those suffering from it by working towards building a healthier future for all Canadians, which includes reducing wait times for diagnosis and treatment and improving access to care. To Arthritis Society Canada and all the partners, thank you for your advocacy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Portneuf, Jacques Cartier. Mr. Speaker, the Bloc has issued an ultimatum for October 29th in an attempt to intimidate its friend, the Liberal Prime Minister. On October 30th, the day before Halloween, nothing will change. The government will remain in place. It's all the makeup and illusions we've come to expect from the Bloc. The Bloc has abandoned Quebec. It has voted more than 180 times to keep the most expensive government in power. A government that trampled Quebec's jurisdiction. A government that broke immigration. The Bloc voted for $500 billion in inflationary spending, which added 100,000 public servants and doubled the federal debt. And that's why, amongst other things, it's called the Bloc Liberal Coalition. It claims to defend Quebecers, but it can't even defend the regions that will suffer from the Caribou Decree. The Bloc is a terrible negotiator. It got nothing for its vote that keeps the Liberals in power. Quebec friends, a word of advice. Beware of the Bloc Québécois.
The honourable member from Waterloo.
In Canada, October is also known as Latin American Heritage Month. We must applaud the late Senator Berga for making this recognition possible. Today I rise to thank the organizers, publishers, writers, artists, volunteers, alongside representatives of Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, Spain, Panama, Peru, the Dominican Republic, and Uruguay for contributing to Philibro Canada 2024. Language is essential to any culture, and this book fair is one of the most important forums for the promotion of Spanish literature while highlighting the importance of Hispanic culture in Canada. I would especially like to applaud Silvia Alfaro, Ramon Sepulveda, and Gabriela Lopez and their team, including Clara Mejia, as it was an honor to host the 6th Ibero-American Book Fair on Parliament Hill, where hundreds gathered to share, promote, and create a much-needed camaraderie in emerging cultural communities. Diversity is Canada's strength, and I hope even more people join us next year. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Barrie Springwater, Oro Medonte.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years, this NDP Liberal government is not worth the cost, crime, or corruption. We know that this Liberal government took a legitimate federal foundation called Sustainable Development Technology Canada and turned it into a green slush fund for their well-connected Liberal cronies and buddies. These Liberal insiders who were appointed to the board of SDTC gave nearly $400 million in tax dollars to their own companies and friends, at a time when Canadians can't afford to eat, heat, and house themselves. Conservatives passed a motion ordering the Liberal government to assist the ongoing RCMP investigation by handing over all documents related to this scandal. The Speaker has found that the Liberal government has breached this order, which has now ground Parliament to a halt. Canadians do not have confidence in this Prime Minister, who has previously been found guilty of breaking ethics laws twice. It is time to axe the tax, cut the corporate corruption, and let Canadians vote in a carbon tax election.
The honourable member from Calgary, Nose Hill.
1 year ago today, Hamas committed the greatest massacre of the Jewish people since the Holocaust. The attack should have woken all of us up to the fact that the terror regime in Tehran and their proxy groups seek the destruction not only of the Jewish people, but of democratic values around the world. These groups care nothing for the lives of the people subjugated under their rule, and they subject them only to death and misery. The genocidal regime in Iran and its proxy terror groups are the foe today for which failing hands threw us the torch to guard against. In that, we must know that the promise of Canada does not self-perpetuate. We must fight for it every day. That means rejecting feckless leaders who placate lawless mobs within Canada's streets. And it means defending the right of Israel, a democratic nation, to protect itself from the same terror groups that also seek death to our Canadian way of life. Remember, colleagues, that peace never comes through appeasement. It only comes through strength. Am Israel High.
The honourable member for Orléans. Mr. Speaker, last week, the Minister of Housing and I had the great pleasure of inaugurating the new NATO Diana Centre in Halifax. The NATO Diana Centre will help develop dual-use technologies that address security and defence challenges. This initiative places Canada at the center of NATO's efforts to maintain its technological lead and preserve peace and security. This investment of over $26 million is also a demonstration of Canada's dedication to the NATO alliance and to our defence. I'd like to thank Major General Pay Payton, who will be the NATO Diana Deputy Military Director for North America. I'd like to thank all of my caucus colleagues, the Liberal Atlantic Caucus colleagues, who have worked tirelessly to make this happen, particularly those in Nova Scotia who worked tirelessly to make this project a reality in Halifax. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Algoma, Manitoulin, Kapuskasing.
As healthcare workers, the Band Council and family members of Wikwimkung unceded territory are working exceptionally hard to replace their aging long-term care home. Built in 1972, the current elders' home is at capacity and no longer meets current regulations. Detailed plans have already been designed for an expanded facility, but they need further investments to ensure that elders can age with dignity close to family and friends, as the license is set to expire June 2025. The community has secured $49 million for this project and need Indigenous Services Canada to cover the funding shortfall. The existing facility must not close without having another one ready to transition current residents within the community. Failure to do so would re-traumatize residents who are residential school survivors and reduce their ability to pass on their historical knowledge and teachings. Time is of the essence. Indigenous Services Canada and the Finance Minister must ensure the $20 million requested is advanced for this new elders' home. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Salaberry-sur-Loire. Today, October 7th, marks the end of a year of horror, a year since Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,200 people in Israel, a year since Hamas took nearly 250 hostages, including dozens of presumed alive but still missing, a year since the deadliest day for Jews since the Holocaust. On October 7th, Hamas perpetrated acts of unprecedented barbarity, plunging the Middle East into a spiral of violence whose end is hard to see. The world has every right to deplore this spiral of violence, but we have no right to forget the victims of October 7th, innocent men, women, and children. We must not forget the hostages and their families who can no longer rest. On behalf of the Bloc Québécois, I reiterate my solidarity with the entire Jewish community who deserves to live through this tragic commemoration in dignity and safety.
The Honourable Member from Thornhill.
A year ago, the Jewish people were savagely attacked in the deadliest act of sadistic barbarism since the Holocaust. Over 1,200 souls were raped, murdered, and taken hostage by a radical death cult backed by the clerical regime in Tehran, 7 Canadians among them. 101 remain in the grips of terrorists, hidden in the tunnels of hell. 1 year ago, the glory of living a peaceful and safe existence in this country as a Jew ended. They have placated the mob of woke radicals and the anti-Zionist Jew haters that reign free in our streets and reward terror. We used to be a country that was clear and unequivocal about eradicating anti-Semitism here and destroying terrorists without conditions everywhere. For those who remain captive, those waiting for their loved ones to come home, for those who never made it back, we remember you. And for those horrified at the state of our country, we will fight to restore the Canada you know and love, even when they won't. Yeah.
The Honourable Member from Mississauga, Erin Mills.
Mr. Speaker, 1 year ago, over 1,000 Israelis were killed in a terror attack by Hamas. Since then, Netanyahu's regime has killed tens of thousands of Palestinians and victimized hundreds of thousands in the region. As long as this continues, so too does the harm in our Canadian communities. Over the past year, our local synagogue has had to ask police for support during Shabbat and this past weekend during Rosh Hashanah. Palestinian Canadians who have lost entire generations of family members are afraid to grieve openly and continue to be targeted for their heritage. This is unacceptable. No matter your identity, you deserve to feel safe and to be able to grieve in our country. This is not a political issue, this is a humanity issue. And if members in this House continue to make this tragic loss a partisan issue, we risk losing a part of our own humanity. Today is the horrific anniversary for Jewish and Palestinian Canadians alike. Today is a day of grief, Mr. Speaker.
Oral questions. Questions orales. L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we know that this Prime Minister isn't worth the cost, the crime, or the corruption. The Liberals have paralyzed this Parliament by refusing to respect your judgment, to produce the documents and give them to the RCMP. This is a $400 million scandal. Liberal-appointed executives gave money to their own businesses. 186 conflicts of interest, according to the Auditor General. Will the Liberals respect your judgment and give the evidence to the RCMP so we can get back to work? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, what the Leader of the Opposition is saying is not true. This matter has been referred to the committee for further study. Will the Conservatives decide to follow that example?
The NDP Liberals are not worth the cost, the crime, or the corruption. The Prime Minister has ground the work of Parliament to a halt by refusing to respect your ruling. The government must hand over evidence to the police concerning the $400 million spending scandal that saw Liberal appointees give millions of dollars to their own companies. Wow. The Auditor General says there's 186 conflicts of interest in this scandal. Will the Prime Minister end the cover-up, respect your ruling, give the police the information so that we can have accountability and get back to work?
Yeah. The Honourable Leader of the House in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, it's demonstrably false what the Leader of the Opposition is saying, because your ruling was to send this matter to the House and Procedure Affairs Committee for more study. And so, in fact, it is only the Conservatives that are now obstructing their own obstruction, because they don't want this to go to committee, because it would demonstrate that they are trying to upend charter rights and override police independence. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Parliament can get back to work this minute if the government will just hand over the evidence to the police about this $400 million Liberal spending scandal. I found it interesting. They say everybody's going to lose their charter rights if the police get evidence into this $400 million Liberal spending scandal. Right. No, what will happen is that the Liberal nominees and appointees who engaged in 186 conflicts of interest to stuff their own pockets will be held criminally accountable, and Canadians might get their money back. Why won't they hand over the evidence, respect your ruling, so we can get back to work around here?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, what's interesting about this is that there's actually proof that the Leader of the Opposition is saying is false, because in your ruling you said this matter needs to go to the House and Procedures Affairs Committee for further study, because this is unprecedented in what the Conservatives are putting forward, because, as the RCMP mentioned, it would upend charter rights and it would blur the lines between judicial and legislative independence. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives can follow your ruling and we can all go back to work, which is what exactly the Canadians want us to do. Thank you.
Yes, we did. I'd like to thank all members for being very patient and not taking the microphone. I'm going to remind the Honourable Member from South Shore St. Margaret's to do the same. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
A year ago today, a sadistic and genocidal death cult, Hamas, carried out the biggest attack on Jews since the Holocaust and has 100 more hostages. Bring them home. Here at home, though, our Jewish friends and neighbors have been doubly victimized as anti-Semitic mobs take to the streets shouting, "From Palestine to Lebanon, Israel will soon be gone. There's only one solution: intifada, revolution." Will the government clearly and unequivocally condemn these genocidal chants from hateful mobs on our streets?
The Honourable Minister for Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, Judy Weinstein, Vivian Silver, Ben Mizrachi, Netta Epstein, Shir Georgi, Alexandre Luc, Idal Vital Kaploun, Tiferet Lapido. May their memories be a blessing. It was my honor to have met with their families here at home and in Israel. And on the anniversaries of Hamas' horrific attacks, my promise to their loved ones is the following. Year after year, Canadians will honor their memories, and to Jewish people, we stand with you. We won't relent until the last hostage returns home.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
She does relent every single day, just like her leader. I asked a very simple question. Mobs have taken to the streets in front of Jewish homes, hospitals, and businesses to shout anti-Semitic hate slogans. I quoted a number of them and invited the minister to rise to her feet and specifically condemn them, to stand with Jews against the anti-Semitism that has been allowed to proliferate on our streets. So once again, will she condemn these anti-Semitic chants?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Solicitor General.
Mr. Speaker, today is October 7th, an anniversary of a horrific attack on Jews. 1,200 people killed, over 200 people taken hostage. Our solidarity is with Jews in Israel and with Jewish people in Canada and right around the world. What we stand up against absolutely is the amount of hatred that we have seen in this country and countries around the world where people will target Jewish Canadian schools, daycares, and synagogues for the acts that they have a problem with on another side of the world. We are better than that in this country. We need to stand up against that kind of hatred in support of Jewish people and in place of all people who defend their ability to worship how and whom they choose.
L'honorable député.
The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, seniors came here to the Hill last week to ask for old age security to be increased by 10%. According to a poll, 79% of people agree with that. 79%. And elected officials voted unanimously for it. We just need the government to grant royal recommendation to C-319, but it doesn't want to because it says that that's not how things are done. We are bringing up seniors' living conditions. We're bringing up democracy. And meanwhile, the government keeps talking about procedure. When will they stop dragging their feet and grant royal recommendation? The Honourable Minister of Labour and Seniors. Mr. Speaker, I have visited with many seniors in my riding over the weekend. I have dialogued with them. And knowing my honourable colleague, I'm sure that he has been very clear with seniors. For example, the fact that he is opposed to lowering retirement age to 65, the Bloc Québécois voted against that. When we increased the guaranteed income supplement, the Bloc voted against. And when we brought in dental care for thousands of seniors in Quebec, the Bloc Québécois voted against that. The member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, seniors are mobilizing to increase their pensions. 79% of people agree. All parties voted for it at committee. And yet, the Liberals just keep talking to us about procedural problems. And the same thing applies to the issue of supply management. Farmers want C-282. All of the parties voted for it, but it's stuck in the Senate. And once again, the Liberals are refusing to do anything. In both cases, the Liberals are talking to us about procedural problems, but it's the real problem that the Liberals just don't care.
Culture Niagara Food.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My honourable colleague is well aware that it was our party that initiated the supply management program. It's our party that supported the supply management program through its history. It's a very successful program, and we supported 282, and we urge the other place to move on this legislation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Good job. L'honorable député de New Westminster.
The Honourable Member for New Westminster Burnaby. Mr. Speaker, the right to housing is critical, but the housing crisis has only gotten worse since the Liberals came to power. The Liberals and the Conservatives before them sold more than 1 million affordable housing units to rich developers so that they could get rich at the expense of families. The Liberals let rents double. Meanwhile, the Conservatives helped their real estate donors get rich. Both of these parties provoked the housing crisis. Why do they want families to pay the price for what they've done? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our colleague is right to oppose the Conservatives. When the leader of the opposition was Minister for Housing for the entire country, he only managed to build 6 affordable housing units. But my NDP colleague is also right to say that the Conservative leader is cynical. He's saying that helping seniors who live in low-income housing or co-ops would be encouraging a Soviet lifestyle.
The housing crisis in Indigenous communities continues to be a stain on this government's record. Over 300,000 Indigenous people continue to live in unsuitable housing. The Liberals promised to build homes for First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities and broke it. To make matters worse, Indigenous people are still reeling from the Conservatives' cuts to housing until this day. Liberals break promises, Conservatives gut and cut, Indigenous people pay the price. When will this government finally act to build the homes Indigenous people desperately need?
The Honourable Minister for Public Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our colleague is entirely right. That's why we have been building thousands and tens of thousands of homes for Indigenous Canadians and other Canadians in the last 9 years. Now, if we had built on the record of the Conservative leader with 6 affordable apartments in his entire mandate, we would be a long way from what is needed for Indigenous Canadians in 2024. In addition to that, as I said in French, the Conservative leader doesn't want to support seniors and Indigenous Canadians when they live in low-rent housing because he believes it encourages a sort of Soviet-style housing conditions.
L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
I gave the Foreign Affairs Minister 2 opportunities to condemn the increasingly common and terrifying anti-Semitic chants we hear in the streets. Israel will soon be gone. There is only one solution, intifada, revolution. Twice she refused to condemn those remarks. She continues to pander to Hamas supporters in the Liberal Party as part of her leadership campaign rather than doing her job. So I'll give her another chance. Will she publicly support Israel's right to retaliate against the tyrants of Tehran and the terrorists in Hezbollah and Hamas to protect itself? Yes or no?
Yeah.
If we don't do politics about...
I just want to encourage all members to ensure, consistent with rulings in the past, and I will come back to this near the end of question period, but just to caution all members to please be judicious in their words. The Honourable Minister for Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, if there's a day where we don't do politics about people's lives being taken or people being killed, it's today. Any form of anti-Semitism, I hope, in this House, any form of discrimination, and I really hope that my colleague in front will apologize.
Right on. Right
on. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
If there was ever a day when we needed a government to stand up for what was right, this would be that day. Has sought to divide Canadians by saying one thing to one group and precisely the opposite to another group. And here in this House, remaining radio silent on condemning anti-Semitic chants and on supporting Israel's right to truly defend itself by retaliating against the terrorists and tyrants. Why won't she do the right thing and stand beside the Jewish people today?
Yeah.
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, 1 year ago in the Middle East, peace was broken by a violent terrorist attack by Hamas. On this side of the ocean, we deserve to do better in terms of the protest that we articulate. It needs to be peaceful. What that means is you don't go out on the streets and target a daycare. You don't go out on the streets and target a community center. You don't go out on the streets and target a synagogue. Our resolve to fight anti-Semitism is strong. It has been strong since this Parliament started when we outlawed the willful promotion of anti-Semitism. It is even stronger now when we're advocating for more strict penalties, which that party opposes.
The Honourable Member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Speaker, it was you who ruled that this NDP Liberal government obstructed a lawful order of this House by not turning over the evidence in the $400 million corruption scandal. It has this Parliament paralysed and unable to deal with the misery and chaos that's been created after 9 years of this NDP Liberal government. And taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up for the cover-up of this latest corruption scandal. So will they simply provide the evidence to the police so that this House can get back to its work of holding them accountable?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, that member is again false in his statements, because what you clearly ruled was that this matter should be sent to committee for further study, because it is the first time in this Parliament's history that it is taking its extraordinary powers and abusing them in such an egregious way. The issue with which the honourable member is discussing has been dealt with by this government, but it's up to the Conservatives to stop obstructing their own obstruction so that we can all get back to the important work of governing for Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Only a Liberal would get up in this place and say that the majority of members in this House who were democratically elected exercising powers that are legally bestowed upon this Parliament are somehow infringing upon this government's constitutional right to not be investigated by the RCMP for their own corruption. It's absolutely unbelievable. Over 186 conflicts of interest, $400 million lining the pockets of well-connected Liberal insiders, while Canadians are lined up at food banks in record numbers. So we want to know if this government's expecting the NDP to bail them out and stop us from holding them to account.
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, let's be clear about two things. In terms of a criminal prosecution, the way it normally unfolds is the police seek a search warrant from a judge. The judge evaluates the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Charter interests that are at stake in getting those documents, something of which that party cares not. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, we also have this fundamental premise. It's called police independence. We safeguard it in Canada. You know who doesn't safeguard it? Authoritarian regimes. I guess the Leader of the Opposition and his minions are sharing their blatant observation and favoritism towards authoritarian tactics in this House.
L'honorable député.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, history will remember that this government is corrupt. The latest example is the Green Fund, which ultimately became a slush fund for this government's buddies. The Auditor General was scathing. The leaders of the fund gave money to their own companies 186 times. That is corruption that deserves a police investigation. My question is very clear. When will the Liberals comply with your ruling to give the documents to the police so they can do their work? The Honourable Minister of Innovation. Mr. Speaker, I have a great deal of respect for my colleague, for Louis Saint Laurent, but only the Conservatives could manage to filibuster their own motion. I've never seen anything like it. Mr. Speaker, we said that we would take decisive action, and that's what we've done. We got to the bottom of things. There have been 4 independent reports. The CEO has stepped down. The board stepped down. The fund is now under the National Research Council. We believe that we have taken the right measures to ensure good governance of that program. The Honourable Member. Mr. Speaker, I also respect the Minister, But the problem is that the AG herself said that the minister did not do his work properly and was not paying enough attention to what was happening within the fund. And we know that people here at the table are saying that the RCMP does not have all the documents. The only way to ensure that the RCMP can properly do its work is to ensure that the Liberals actually provide all of the documents. When will the minister finally stand up and do his duty? The Honourable Minister of Innovation. Mr. Speaker, again, I have a great deal of respect for my colleague, but there have been 4 independent reports. Not 1, 4. 4 independent reports were produced. And the RCMP Commissioner has said in an open letter that the RCMP had access to all the documents. So in the interest of Canadians and democracy, in the interests of our work here in the House, we are asking the Conservatives to stop filibustering their own motion and to work hard in the interest of all Canadians. The Honourable Member for Berthier-Masquinongé. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to come back to C-282, a bill that protects supply management. We were wondering why 2 senators, Peter Beam and Peter Harder, were blocking the bill in the Senate. Well, now we know why. Because of Dimitri Soudas, former advisor to Stephen Harper. He said about the 2 senators that they are 2 former deputy ministers who tried many times to convince Stephen Harper to abandon the supply management program. I was there, he said. So these 2 Liberal-appointed senators are trying to topple something that was voted in this House. Is that acceptable for the Liberals?
Alimentaire.
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture.
L'honorable ministre Revenu National.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je peux vous
The Honourable Minister of National Revenue. I assure you that all Liberals here support supply management, just like our Bloc Québécois colleagues. But the Conservatives, well, I can't say the same for them. We have had a conversation with the Senate. We are talking with senators, just like my colleague from the Bloc, but the Senate is independent. These senators are independent. They need to do their work, and we expect them to do their work diligently. The Honourable Member for Berthier-Masquinongé. What's happening in the Senate is very serious. These 2 non-elected officials are attacking our farmers and also the very basis of our democracy. This is where we vote in legislation in this House. If Peter Beam and Peter Harder don't agree with this legislation and want different legislation, then they should have the courage to step down from the Senate and get elected. This is where democracy has its seat. Our people's representatives are here and they supported C-282. So will the government ensure that these 2 senators respect democracy? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Same question, same answer. My colleague gave a very clear answer. We support supply management. And in fact, the Liberal Party, a Liberal government, brought in supply management several decades ago. We have always been very consistent in our position, unlike some members in this House. We have defended supply management even when President Trump wanted to get rid of it and when the Conservatives were asking us to capitulate. Before giving the floor to the member for Berthier-Masquinongé, I would like to invite the members for Mirabel and Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier to ensure that they do not speak until they receive the floor from the Speaker. The Honourable Member. Well, Mr. Speaker, adopting C-282 will be critical for dairy, poultry, and egg producers. That's not according to me. That's what it says in an open letter from the milk, eggs, chicken, and turkey producers of Canada, which just shows that when the Bloc Québécois supports Quebec's interests, sometimes it's such a great idea that all of Canada wants the same thing. Quebec and Canadian farmers want the same thing. This is good for everyone. So will all of the parties ask the Senate to stop blocking this consensus and pass C-282? Thank you. The Honourable Minister of National Revenue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I entirely agree with my colleague from the Bloc Québécois. We support the supply management system. We want to ensure that it continues. It's very important for land use in Canada. The bill is in the Senate at the moment, and we expect senators to deal with it diligently.
The honourable member from Kamloops Thompson Caribou.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years, the NDP Liberals aren't worth the cost, crime, or corruption. You, Mr. Speaker, ruled that this NDP Liberal government must hand over documents relating to what the Auditor General found was a $400 million fraud with 186 conflicts of interest. This is at a time when Canadians are having trouble heating, eating, and housing themselves. When will this Liberal government end the cover-up and provide those documents to the RCMP as they should?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
I'm going to appeal to that member as a former Crown prosecutor. He knows something about the independence of our institutions. When the police take action, they do so without political direction or manipulation. The police make decisions. They then go to a court and ask for a search warrant. It is judicially authorized because it has charter protections. That's something that member used to be familiar with. I just wish he would educate some of his colleagues about the importance of these safeguards and why they exist in democracies.
The honourable member from Kamloops Thompson Caribou.
Mr. Speaker, listening to the Attorney General, you would almost think that the Liberals believe they have a charter right to line the pockets of Liberal insiders, Mr. Speaker. This is at a time when Canadians are lining up at food banks, when people cannot afford their mortgages, they cannot find a house, and yet Liberals line pockets of Liberal insiders. This is so on brand for Liberals. It's like they're entitled to their entitlements. Mr. Speaker, when will this Liberal government end the entitlement for Liberal insiders, hand over the documents unredacted so that Canadians and police can know the truth?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, there's a qualitative difference between providing documents for the purposes of Parliament and providing documents for the purposes of prosecution. The second you cross that line, you need to impose the protections that the Charter provides. That's what that document represents. Most Canadians get behind that document, save for my Conservative colleagues. The reason why the safeguards are important is because they protect things like privacy, your freedom from unreasonable search and seizure. Again, fundamental precepts that member knows full well because he used to practice in this area. I just wish he could educate his colleagues about why we need to safeguard important charter rights.
Colleagues. The honourable member from Carlton Trail, Eagle Creek.
After 9 years of NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, time is up. The Green Slush Fund is more proof that the NDP Liberals are not worth the cost, crime, or corruption. They have violated a House order to cover up for their friends. This $400 million Liberal scandal has paralyzed Parliament, making it impossible to address the Prime Minister's agenda of crime and chaos. Will the NDP Liberals end the cover-up, give proof to the police, so Parliament can get working for Canadians?
The Honourable Minister for Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, talking about working for Canadians. Now Canadians at home, we're seeing conservative blocking conservative motion, Mr. Speaker. Can you imagine that? We live in a parallel world in this place. The Conservatives are blocking their own motion, Mr. Speaker. What we did and we promised the Canadian was to get to the bottom of this, Mr. Speaker. There'll be 4 independent reports, Mr. Speaker, including the Auditor General, including the Commissioner of the RCMP. We said he has all the documents, Mr. Speaker. Not only the board resigned, the CEO resigned, the integrity of the foundation has been transferred, Mr. Speaker. We uphold the highest standard in this House.
Colleagues, the honourable member from Victoria.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians expect their government to do more when it comes to the climate crisis, but the Liberals are so far deep in the pockets of Canada's worst polluters that they plan to label fossil fuels as sustainable. They are caving to the interests of big banks and big oil instead of protecting Canadians. Oil and gas profits are going up. Their emissions are going up, and they want to greenwash fossil fuels. Why are the Liberals helping them?
The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will quote a colleague from Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. I quote, "This is why, as a New Democrat, as a progressive, as an environmentalist, We are in favor of putting a price on pollution. We support taxing carbon, which already happens in the majority of Canadian provinces. On this side of the House, Mr. Speaker, we're not caving to pressure and disinformation campaign by the Conservative Party of Canada. It's unfortunate that the NDP doesn't seem to be progressive anymore or environmentalist anymore.
The honourable member from Winnipeg Centre.
Mr. Speaker, nothing but excuses from these Liberals, including abortion. They are failing to stand up to Conservative premiers because they will not enforce the Canada Health Act, including Alberta's premier, who is leasing hospitals to Covenant House, which provides emergency contraceptives and abortion services. The Women's Health Coalition says this jeopardizes reproductive rights. Will the minister stand up to Conservative premiers, enforce the Canada Health Act, and uphold abortion care as health care?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Abortion care is health care. Making sure that a woman has access to an abortion service is essential medicine, and we believe this on this side of the House. We fight for it every day. But let me go a step further. It's also essential that every woman in this country gets access to the contraceptives they need to have control over their body. And if you're against abortion and you're against contraception and you're against sexual education, then I'm sorry, you're against women's freedom altogether. And on this side of the House, we're going to make sure every woman gets the sexual and reproductive tools and support that she needs to have true freedom, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Kitchener South Hespeler.
Mr. Speaker, buying a home is one of the biggest decisions that a Canadian can make in their lifetime. Unfortunately, high mortgage costs can be barriers to many, particularly the younger generation seeking to purchase their first home. Our government has made some of the boldest mortgage reform changes in decades to ensure that younger Canadians can turn home buying into a reality. Can the Minister of Finance explain to this House how the adjustments to the mortgage amortization period will enhance and improve access to homes for thousands of Canadians?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague from Kitchener South Hespeler for the question and for giving me the chance to talk about the important measures that we have recently announced to help young Canadians achieve their dream of home ownership. We've announced for first-time homebuyers amortizations of 30 years and 30-year amortizations for all Canadians buying new builds. Not only will this put the dream of home ownership in reach for more young Canadians, it will help get more homes built faster. That's good news for Canadians, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from St. Albert, Edmonton.
Mr. Speaker, the Conflict of Interest Act is clear. A minister shall not be involved in the operations of a business while in cabinet. Text messages indicate that someone named Randy at the minister from Edmonton's shady company was involved in its business operations, including an alleged $500,000 fraud. No one from the company named Randy can be identified except the minister, and everyone knows why. Will the minister finally fess up and just admit he broke the law?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We agree that as witnesses go to committee, they need to share information that is asked for them by the committee. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from St. Albert, Edmonton.
Well, the minister seems to be in hiding. The fact is that it is no coincidence that after months of inquiry, there is no other Randy that can be identified but the minister. And the minister's own business partner even admitted the only Randy ever connected to the shady company is the minister. So again, will the minister stand in his place, fess up, admit he broke the law, and better yet, resign?
Hear, hear. Hear, hear. The honourable minister, the honourable leader of the government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I have said, if a witness is called before committee, they are expected to provide the information asked of them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Sturgeon River, Parkland.
Mr. Speaker,
Who's Randy? It's a question that has gripped the nation, and we have yet to receive a truthful answer. Text messages reveal that the Minister of Employment's fraud-ridden business partner was working with Randy to shake down a medical supply company. The texts show that Randy was in Vancouver the same day as the Minister of Employment was there attending a cabinet retreat. The minister denied speaking with his partner. He claimed he didn't even have his phone, but now he admits that he did text and call his partner. So will the minister stand up and admit that he's been Randy all along?
Colleagues, the Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we have stated all along, that if a witness is called to committee and asked to provide information, they need to provide that information to committee. Thank you.
That's right.
The Honourable Member from Sturgeon River.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Employment denied being Randy. He claimed he had no business dealings with his fraud-ridden business partner. He said he never even spoke to him in Vancouver while he was at the cabinet retreat. He said it was impossible. But after handing over his phone to the Ethics Commissioner, he finally admitted that he did text and call his business partner while at the cabinet retreat in Vancouver. The minister concealed the truth from Parliament for months, and only after getting caught did he admit his actions. Now the Speaker has even found his business partner in contempt of Parliament. The minister has had all summer to reveal the real Randy. Will he stand up and reveal himself today?
The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I have said and reiterate, that as a witness is called to committee and if they are asked to provide information to that committee, we expect they provide that information. Thank you,
That's
Mr.
right.
Speaker.
Very.
L'Honourable Député de Mirabel.
The Honourable Member for Mirabel. Mr. Speaker, whistleblowers who have courage to report wrongdoing in the federal government have to wait 3 years, not for an investigation to be concluded, but for one to even be started. Imagine just how reluctant this makes people to blow the whistle. And imagine how this affects the public's confidence at a time when the federal government is knee-deep in scandals like ArriveCan and SDTC. The Public Sector Integrity Commissioner is asking for the resources that she needs to process whistleblowing in a timely manner. Will the government immediately give the commissioner these resources?
The Honourable President, l'Honourable President.
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board. Mr. Speaker, my office is working with the Commissioner's office to address funding concerns and resource concerns. Protecting whistleblowers is absolutely a priority, a top priority for our government. We have brought about many improvements to the process. So, Mr. Speaker, whistleblowers play a critical role in our democracy, and we are here to support them. The Honourable Member for Mirabel. Mr. Speaker, consider this. While the federal government is embroiled in various scandals, there are 161 whistleblower complaints that have yet to be processed. 161 complaints related either to wrongdoing or to reprisals against whistleblowers. The government must increase the commissioner's budget as per her request, but the government must also ensure that all whistleblowers are protected, which is a reminder that Bill C-290, which passed unanimously in this House, has not yet made it through the Senate. Will the government ensure that the commissioner has not only the budget that she needs, but also the necessary legal framework to do her job? The Honourable President of the Treasury Board. Mr. Speaker, first of all, as I said, my office is working with the Integrity Commissioner's office. We are working together to address these issues. We supported the bill that my colleague just mentioned. I hope that all senators will also support the bill. There is an external working group as well, which is studying revisions to the Whistleblower Protection Act, and we support whistleblowers.
From Hastings, Lennox, and Addington.
After 9 years of NDP Liberals, taxes are up, crime is up, cost is up, time is up, Mr. Speaker. The NDP Liberal carbon tax is driving up the cost of food, adding to an already terrible food insecurity crisis. It has gotten so bad, doctors are being told to be on the lookout for scurvy. That's right, scurvy. Not only are many Canadians grasping at their grocery bills in advance of Thanksgiving dinner, our medical professionals are concerned about the return of a centuries-old disease. Mr. Speaker, how is this Prime Minister so stubbornly convinced on his carbon tax, yet so afraid to call an election?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, I'll tell you, Mr. Speaker, what won't help somebody facing food insecurity in this country that's caused by a global crisis and rising food costs, it's cutting the rebate check. That's what the Conservatives would do. I talked to an individual, Bob, today. He's a senior who, with the Canadian Dental Care Plan, just saved $3,000 on essential care that he needed, talking to me about what that meant for his family and their ability to afford food. That would be cancelled by the Conservatives. All the Conservatives have are slogans, and we saw what that did. Fake lakes, gazebos, rubber checks, because they're going to go from slogans to try to win an election to slogans to explain why they're not doing anything for anybody. We're not going to allow that to happen.
The Honourable Member from Hastings, Lennox and Addington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While sunny days are over, everyone should be concerned when leading medical publications are raising the alarm bells about scurvy in Canada in 2024. This disease was an issue 400 years ago. The cost of the carbon tax on food pricing is real. Limited access to adequate food caused by this increase is real. And lastly, the negative effects on the health of Canadians is real. Mr. Speaker, will the government axe the tax to lower the cost of food so that Canadians can once and again enjoy an affordable family Thanksgiving dinner?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
You know what's back after decades of being gone? Tuberculosis, measles, misinformation that is being spread around things like vaccines and about public health is doing insane damage to people. And I'll tell you, if you care about food insecurity in this world, then you should be supporting a school food program. If you care about food insecurity, then you should be helping families lift up, not giving them empty slogans with nothing behind them. Mr. Speaker, we face difficult times in this world right now. This requires serious and real conversations. That's what we're centered on. That's what we think about. That's the solutions that we offer.
The Honourable Member for Beauce. Mr. Speaker, everything is more expensive thanks to the Bloc Liberal coalition. The price of housing, the price of gas, but most of all, the price of food, which has shot up 22% since 2021. The food banks in my riding of Beauce barely have enough food to feed families in the region. But the Bloc Québécois continues to support this government, which has impoverished Quebecers. Families are really struggling. They need help as soon as possible. When will this government listen to Canadians and call an election? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have great respect for my colleague. My colleague is talking about Canadians and Quebecers who are struggling, but the Conservative leader's solution would be to penalize them, to harm them by cutting benefits that they need. Even for people in the colleague's riding, they would also cut the school food program, which would help children in his riding who arrive at school in the morning with empty stomachs. Because according to the Conservative leader, feeding school children is just bureaucracy. The Honourable Member for Madawaska, Restigouche. Mr. Speaker, in all of my conversations with students, scientists, researchers, one thing is very clear. The solutions to many of the world's problems can be found through science and research. From the Arctic to climate change to food science and beyond, can the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry inform this House of the work our government is doing to support scientists? The Honourable Minister of Innovation. Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank my colleague for his great work. Indeed, when we invest in science and research, everyone wins, Mr. Speaker. That's why earlier this year in the budget, we announced an investment of $800 million through the Strategic Science Fund for 24 Canadian organizations working to solve some of the world's most significant challenges. And more recently, and everyone should be thrilled about this, Canada signed an agreement with the European Union's Horizon Europe program. This means that our researchers, scientists, and students will collaborate with their counterparts in Europe. Let's be ambitious, let's make this a priority, and let's make Canada a true leader in research and science.
Kent and Middlesex.
Speaker, after 9 years of NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. And you know what else is up? The number of kids needing to use a food bank. the London Food Bank is already helping over 16,000 people every month, and more post-secondary students are going hungry. Thanksgiving is this weekend and many families will be going without. Why? Because the cost of the carbon tax is making food too expensive. So if this Prime Minister is so convinced on his carbon tax, why won't he call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister for Families, Social Development.
Mr. Speaker, we all suffer when some of our fellow Canadians are suffering. And we've made some historic investments, Mr. Speaker, including in 2016 when we brought in the Canada Child Benefit, which is providing support to over 4.3 million families each and every month, Mr. Speaker, an allowance that goes in their bank account every month to help with those basics, Mr. Speaker. This is how we are fighting for and supporting Canadian families, Mr. Speaker.
Bravo. The honourable member from Lambton, Kent, Middlesex.
Mr. Speaker, of course the Laurentian elites wouldn't understand. They don't know what it's like to be a parent living paycheck to paycheck, trying to feed their families. Constant NDP Liberal tax hikes and inflationary spending means that 1 million Ontarians had to use a food bank last year because they couldn't afford to buy food. In Middlesex, London, that means that 23,000 kids are going hungry. What parents really want is to give their kids a good Thanksgiving. So will the Prime Minister give Canadians what they want and call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister for Families, Children and Social Development.
Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we're focused on fighting for Canadian families. What does that mean, Mr. Speaker? That means making $1 billion commitment to families and children across this country to bring forward a school food program, Mr. Speaker, that will feed over 400,000 children each and every year. We've already seen progress with Newfoundland and Labrador on board and putting this forward in their schools. I look forward to more provinces and territories signing on so we can ensure kids have food at school.
The Honourable Member for Montmagny, Lillet, Kamouraska, Rivière-du-Loup. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After 9 years of this Liberal government, young Canadians and Quebecers are suffering. The sky-high cost of living is driving people to despair all over the country. 1.3 million Quebecers are experiencing food insecurity. And they're struggling to find a job, too. In a country like Canada, that's a disgrace. Quebecers have had enough of this centralizing, inflationary Liberal government, but the Bloc Québécois is still insisting on keeping them in power. It's unbelievable. Young people need jobs and housing. Can the Bloc Québécois give young Quebecers a break and stop supporting this Liberal Prime Minister who is ruthlessly impoverishing them? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ruthless? You know what's ruthless? Conservative policy toward Quebec's families and young Quebecers. He should bring his party leader with him. He says it's bureaucratic to help people to give food to children at schools, children who arrive in the morning with empty bellies. In fact, what about in the members' riding? We need an explanation about why it's bureaucratic to help hungry children.
Member from St. John's East.
In 2012, the Conservative Prime Minister traveled to the World Economic Forum in Davos to announce their plan to raise the retirement age to 67. Their plan, supported by the Leader of the Opposition, would have taken away OAS from 1 million Canadian seniors who turn 65 this year. Can the Minister of Seniors share how the government has defended Canadians' right to retire at 65 and what further supports for seniors is at risk of Conservative cuts?
The Honourable Minister for Labour and Seniors.
Mr. Speaker, thanks to my colleague, the chair of our Seniors Caucus. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives' World Economic Forum agenda tried to turn Canadians' 2 best years of retirement into their 2 worst years of work by raising the retirement age to 67. Shameful. We reversed it. That's right. Their World Economic Forum wish list would cut our $1,000 increase to the GIS that helps nearly 1 million seniors. It would cut rent relief for vulnerable seniors and would kick 2.5 million seniors off the Canadian Dental Care Plan. The World Economic Forum agenda will not pass, Mr. Speaker.
Colleagues,
even your colleagues don't believe you.
the honourable member from Courtenay, Alberni.
Mr. Speaker, for 3 years, the Liberals have allowed a company in Union Bay to break apart a massive ship in the high tide zone without being in a self-contained floating dry dock. This is despite objections of the province, local communities, and First Nations. Nowhere in the world would this unregulated chaos be allowed to take place. A recent provincial inspection found the operations are discharging effluent more than 100 times the limit for copper and more than 13 times the limit for zinc. What will it finally take for the federal government to step in and put an end to this dangerous, unregulated shipbreaking?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as the member opposite knows, there's a federal responsibility, but there's also a provincial responsibility. And there is a responsibility to collaborate on every piece of what the member opposite talked about. We're going to continue to uphold our end on the DFO side. We ask the province to do the same. Yes.
The honourable member from Spadina, Fort York.
Mr. Speaker, today is the first anniversary of the Hamas attack on Israel. On that horrific day, Hamas killed over 1,200 people, including 8 Canadians and over 200 taken hostage. At home, in 1 year, there's been nearly 5,800 incidents of hatred and anti-Semitism, including Samadoun posters today for a Toronto event under the heading Long Live October 7. Mr. Speaker, the government's pathetic condemnation of Hamas with no action on domestic pro-Hamas supporters does nothing to end violence and intimidation. Will the government give up its veiled support for terrorist sympathizers? The safety of our citizens is the only priority. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
I'll agree with one thing that independent member just said. The safety of our citizens is the only priority. That's why we have a national action plan to combat hatred. That's why we have a bill on the legislature floor right now, Bill C-63, that would target online radicalization that leads to anti-Semitism. How does somebody get to the point where they're targeting a Jewish day school, a Jewish daycare, or a Jewish synagogue? Because they are radicalized online. That same bill has augmentation of penalties for willful promotion of anti-Semitism, public incitement of hatred, and advocating genocide. That's a bill that not every party in this chamber supports, and that's what we need to get behind.
Colleagues, chers collègues, à la suite des discussions.
Following discussions among representatives of all parties in the House, it is my understanding that there is consent for a moment of silence to be observed for victims of the attack in Israel 1 year ago.
I understand there is agreement to observe a moment of silence in memory of the victims of the attack in Israel that happened a year ago. I now invite honourable members to rise. J'invite les honorables députés à se lever. I thank all honourable members. Colleagues, before I get to points of order, one moment, please. Colleagues, as I said during question period, there is a matter to which I would like to return. After reviewing the transcript, in one of his questions, the Leader of the Opposition used language that was very similar to language which was found unparliamentary in the past. Earlier this year, a member accused the Leader of the Opposition of pandering to a regime I think most of us would find odious. That member was asked to withdraw that comment. In his question today, the Leader of the Opposition accused the Minister of Foreign Affairs of something similar. As I have said before, there are ways to make our points without resorting to these types of comments. I would ask that the Leader of the Opposition withdraw his comment at the earliest opportunity. I now understand the honourable member. Point of order. The honourable member, the honourable parliamentary secretary.
So, Mr. Speaker, on the same point of order, one of the concerns that we've expressed in the past, and it's related to what it is that you just finished ruling out, the Leader of the Official Opposition, and we support your statement, Mr. Speaker, but we wanted to make it clear in terms of ensuring that all members are treated equally and that the Leader of the Conservative Party not be allowed to speak until he's actually given a formal apology.
The Chair has already mentioned, as I just made in my declaration, and I think that addresses the points, and I'll invite all members, if they have questions, to read that. The honourable member from Thornhill is seeking unanimous consent.
Today marks the first and extremely dark anniversary of October 7th, when terrorists carried out the worst attack on Jews since the Holocaust. And after consultation with parties, if you seek it, you will find unanimous consent for the following motion: that this House unequivocally reaffirms Israel's right to defend itself from the terrorists who attack it, expresses support for the victims of October 7th and their families and the people of Israel, that calls for the immediate release of the 101 hostages still being held captive, condemns the grotesque rise in anti-Semitism and hate towards Jews in Canada over the past year, and condemns Hamas and Hezbollah as terrorist entities which must be eliminated. Thank you.
All those opposed to the honourable member moving the motion will please say nay. Agreed. The House has heard the terms of the motion. All those opposed to the motion will please say nay. Carried. Point of order. The honourable member from South Shore, St. Margaret's.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On September 26th, the Speaker said the following in the House. The House has clearly ordered the production of certain documents, and that order has clearly not been fully complied with. You then went on to say that you cannot come to any other conclusion but then to find a prima facie question of privilege has been established. I'd like to table the...
I think the honourable member is moving into debate. It being 3:17, the House will now proceed to the taking of the deferred recorded division on the motion to concur in the 20th report of the Standing Committee on Human Resources, Skills and Social Development and the status of persons with disabilities. Comme il est 15h17.
It being 3:17, the House will now proceed to the vote to adopt the 20th report of the Standing Committee on Human Resources, Skills and Social Development and the status of persons with disabilities. Call in the members.
The question is as follows. La question est la suivante. Ms. Zerillo, seconded by Ms. Barron, moved that the 20th report of the Standing Committee on Human Resources, Skills and Social Development and the status of persons with disabilities presented on Wednesday, May 8, 2024, be concurred in. The 10-minute period for members voting electronically has started, and the House will now proceed to the vote for members participating in person. All those in favour of the motion will please rise.
Ms. Ng. Ms. Ng. Monsieur Duclos. Monsieur Duclos. Ms. Hutchins. Ms. Hutchins. Ms. Tassi. Ms. Tassi. Ms. Suds. Ms. Suds. Ms. Murray. Ms. Murray. Ms. Grohl. Ms. Grohl. Mr. McGuinty. Mr. McGuinty. Mr. Casey. Mr. Casey. Mr. Vandal. Monsieur Vandal. Ms. Cara. Ms. Cara.